right, Angela Merkel's political clout was dealt a terrible blow over the weekend. Indeed, it was a double blow, where voters defected in droves from her coalition between her own party, the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, and the Social Democrats, the SPD. And instead, these voters stood with the nationalist populist Alternative for Germany, the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, which saw its absolute best showing to date as a political party. There were two state elections on Sunday, one in Brandenburg and the other in Saxony. So these were elections for the state parliaments and governorships. Germany has 16 states, and these two, Brandenburg and Saxony, are in eastern Germany. And the polls were showing that the Nationalist Populist Party, known as the AfD, which I know many of you are very familiar with, and root for in every election in Germany, the polls were showing that they had surged of late in these two states. And when it came to the elections, they did not disappoint. While the AfD did not win in either state, they posted their by far best ever results, sending a very strong message to Angela Merkel that her days of political dominance over Germany are over, and sending another very strong message to all of Europe that the days of the nationalist populist right are only just beginning. With the vote tallies reported, in Saxony, Merkel's party, the CDU, came in first with 32% of the vote, while the AfD was just behind with an astonishing 28% of the vote, coming in second. Now, just to give you an idea of how disastrous this was for Merkel's CDU, the last election back in 2014, the CDU got nearly 40% of the vote, 39.4%. That means they lost 1/5, 20% of their support yesterday, which appears to have largely defected to the nationalist populist AfD. In Brandenburg, the AfD also finished second, this time behind Merkel's coalition partners, the Social Democrats, the SPD. The nationalist populists got 24% support, just missing the Social Democrats, who got 26% of the vote. The AfD more than doubled their vote tally there from their last election, 2014, when they got 12% of the vote. By contrast, just like with Merkel's party, the Social Democrats also saw a significant erosion in their support from their last election back in 2014. In fact, Merkel's party, the CDU, really collapsed in Brandenburg. They only won about 15% of the vote, which is down from the 23% they got in their last election. The AfD trounced them there. So once again, what we're seeing here is this stubborn persistence of the nationalist populist right in Europe's elections. Remember, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, is a very new party. They were only founded a few years back in 2013. They stormed into the German parliament with 13% of the vote back in 2017. That's when Merkel's leadership first began to really show some major cracks in her support. It was the first time the nationalist right came into the German parliament since the surge of the nationalist right throughout Europe started in the 1990s. And then the question was, how well would the AfD do from there, right? 13% in a multi-party election was pretty darn good. They were in third place. And they had some state elections since then, like in Bavaria, but they haven't been able to break out of that 13% threshold. Even with the European parliamentary elections back in May, they only got 11% of the vote, so they were down around that area. But now, with these two elections back to back, okay, the AfD have just surged in support in two, not just one, but two elections. They broke the 20% threshold and became the second most popular party in their respective states. Indeed, they almost broke the 30% threshold in Saxony, getting 28% of the vote. So, as of yesterday, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, has officially arrived. They are now a mainstream party in two of Germany's 16 states. So what are pundits saying about this morning? What are the takeaways from all of this, from yesterday's election? Well, first off, there's no question. I think Politico said it best. There's little question that even though the Social Democrats have been reigning supreme in Brandenburg since German reunification, and the same goes with the Christian Democratic Union, similarly in Saxony all these years, reigning relatively uncontested for decades. There's no question, though that's the case, the writing is on the wall. I mean, there's no way around that. The writing is on the wall. The grand coalition between the CDU and the SPD, the Social Democrats, has never been weaker. It's never been more strained as a result of a massive political paradigm shift that involves the mainstreaming of the nationalist populist right in Germany. There's just no two ways around that. The two dominant center parties, the center-right CDU and the center-left SPD, literally hemorrhaged voters. In fact, get this. You're going to love this. You're going to love this. As far as the SPD in Saxony is concerned, yesterday was the party's worst ever score in a state election in its 130-year history. Okay, I'll say that again. Yesterday's election was the worst state election for the center-left SPD in its 130 years history. The fact is that the center-left has been hemorrhaging support now for years. It's not just in Germany, but throughout Europe. And I think this is why the new coalition in Italy between the Five Stars and the center-left Democrats is just doomed from the start. The center-left is dying throughout Europe precisely because the center itself is collapsing. The center-right has been able to survive thus far solely because of the resurgent nationalist right that's taking Europe by storm. And this election, once again, demonstrates that. The AfD, the Alternative for Germany, is closer than ever to real political power. Remember, all political parties in Germany have formally refused to work a coalition with the AfD. It's a very similar situation to that of Sweden, where all the parties there are refusing to work with the Sweden Democrats. But many parties are observing, many pundits, I should say, are observing, that if the AfD keeps getting these polling numbers, right, then the president of Europe demonstrates that it won't be long before the other political parties start working with the AfD. Inevitably, political paradigm shifts eventually work themselves out into parliamentary coalitions, as they have in Austria and Hungary and Poland and Georgia and Britain and Netherlands and Norway and Finland, and up until last week in Italy, and inevitably in Germany. And so, of course, all of this leaves us with the question, what of the future of Angela Merkel? Well, in many respects, Angela Merkel is really nothing more than an old Lenin or Stalin statue standing in a courtyard, all the while the storm clouds are gathering above and the tectonic plates are shifting below. Eventually, the edifice collapses, right? Either through people just physically pulling it down or just through the rust of neglect. Angela Merkel's days of political dominance are over. And as of yesterday, the clear message to all of Europe is that the days of the nationalist populist right are only just beginning.